Welcome to the Weekly Starter for English 403B. This is the Weekly Starter for February 9th, 2015. Today's Weekly Starter is going to give you an introduction into the elements of Romanticism, and I'm going to help you understand Romanticism better through art. I think visually it will help you see where we come from and what they're rebelling against. Okay, so let's first look at the calendar for the week. This week you're going to be starting with lesson 3. You should have done lessons 1 and 2 last week. You're going to be looking at poems by William Wordsworth this week and looking at Kubla Khan and Byron and some elements there. Okay, so in this unit, we're focusing on what's called Romanticism. Now, when you first hear the word Romanticism, often you think, oh, it's almost Valentine's Day. Oh, that's not very romantic to not bring flowers and those kinds of elements. All right, that's not what we're talking about at all. In fact, Romanticism has nothing to do with the lovey-dovey stuff. It has to do with a movement of artists that rebelled against the previous qualities and morals and elements that were going on. We'll talk about those. Okay, so here's what Romanticism is. Romanticism was an artistic and literary movement. It began in the late 1700s. Often we think about it starting with the French Revolution. In 1789, the storm of the Bastille. It lasted into the 1830s. We still see some romantic elements into the 1850s. Who were these romantics? Well, they were artists and writers. We also have musicians like Beethoven who reacted against elements such as industrialization, aristocratic power and privilege, and the reliance on reason solely to understand the world. So again, let's look more into what they were reacting against. So previously to the Romantic period, we had what's called the Age of Enlightenment. We also call it the Age of Reason. And this time period valued order, particularly order in the class system. So very much the higher class was the ruling order. They believed in order in art and order in thinking. They were all about science. In fact, one of the romantic novels we don't read, Frankenstein, shows the reaction against this idea of science. But the reason that we started to see this reaction is because the late 18th century was a time of chaos. We have the American Revolution, the French Revolution, people are starving, and so many artists and others believed that these ideals of the Enlightenment were no longer what should be the ruling ideas. So let's start and look at what an example of a piece of art that would have been Enlightenment art. Okay, if you'll notice this piece, everything is in order. There are numerous triangles so that we have an even element. We have the triangles in the legs, the spears, the triangle of the women, plus we have arches. So everything is ordered. And this is really supposed to be a very emotional piece. This is when these brothers are making this oath to their father, and there's supposed to be a lot of passion here. But you'll notice everything is very subdued. It's, again, all in order. And that's where you're going to see the Enlightenment. Here's another example of an Enlightenment painting where it's all about science and everything is very ordered. But then we get to the Romantic period, and notice this painting. There's movement and colors are almost, they're not as ordered, they're blending together, there's violence, and this is where the Romantics show what's really going on in the world versus everything is wonderful and fine and dandy. Here's another example. We call this the Age of Reason or Neoclassicism, where it's a portrait. It's supposed to be outside, but it doesn't look like there's any wind or anything going on. Yet when we get to the Romantic period, notice that we change from an upper class lady to an orphan, a poor young lady. There's movement in her face. There's passion. Her clothes are wrinkled. There's a lot of difference there. And this is where you're going to see the Romantics versus the Age of Reason. So when you think about the Romantics and what they value, something to remember is the 5 I's. They believe in imagination, intuition, idealism, inspiration, and individuality. And those are the elements that really drive the Romantics. To the Romantics, human imagination is a more powerful tool than strict reason for understanding the world. So as you look at the poems from the Romantics, think about how they are talking about imagination. We're studying Wordsworth this week, and he said, "Not chaos, not the darkest pit of lowest Erebus, nor aught of blinder vacancy scooped out, by help of dreams can breed such fear and awe as fall upon us often when we look into our minds, into the mind of man, my haunt, and the main region of my song." So again, for those of you who struggle with poetry, he's talking about the imagination. The mind is where we have this huge scope for imagination and dreams. And a painting from that piece, time period, The Nightmare by Fuseli. Notice again that this is kind of the bad element of the imagination, but the element can cause nightmare and swooning and passion. All right, so then we also talked about intuition. And I'm going to be skipping through some of these 5 I's and just focusing on the big ones that you need to know. So Romantics place value on intuition or feeling instincts over reason. Emotions were important in Romantic art, and that includes Romantic poetry. In fact, talking more about Wordsworth, since we're studying him this week, he talked about poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Previously to the Romantic period, poetry was very ordered, the meter needed to be very regular, and then the Romantics started experimenting with ideas and different words and different elements, and overflowing of feelings. Just as we see in this painting. Again, feelings. These people are starving. There isn't everything nice and ordered here. They also believed inspiration, because if you believe poetry comes from the overflow of powerful feelings, you believe that inspiration comes from something. So they saw artists as inspired creators rather than technical masters. For those of you who are into music, think about Mozart, who had been from the Age of Reason, and his mastery of technical elements compared to Beethoven and this spontaneous passion of feeling that comes out in his music. So again, like I said, it's going to be more spontaneous rather than precise. They also believed in individuality. And individuality, how every person experiences things differently. It's not a collective conscious, but an individual conscious. So let's talk really quickly before we end about their writings. As you look at their poetry, we came from the Age of Reason was about the upper class. But the Romantics believed that writing should appeal to all people, not just the upper class. So the words, even though you may think the words are very archaic and sometimes difficult, they actually were much less educated and sophisticated in the Romantic period. The Romantics used simpler language. They also believed writing, especially poetry, could bring social improvement. So that's why they wanted to appeal to all classes. Writers should capture emotions and sensations of their experiences. Again, passion. And each individual, regardless of class, age, or gender, has worth. And those are some pretty revolutionary ideas. You may not think so because we believe those things, but to the Romantics, these were new ideas. Something that we have to look at with the Romantics. We have to look at their view of nature. And you're going to be reading Wordsworth. Most of Wordsworth's poems have this element and these themes about nature being a source of truth, comfort, and enlightenment. So again, the Romantics viewed that nature is a comfort and shelter from the troubles of life. Nature teaches truth about life and offers models of behavior and can inspire artists. Going into nature is where we can find truth and beauty. Nature is a place of beauty that rewards those who take time to observe it closely. Now, I have to add that of course, we can't say that all the romantics saw nature this way. We have a group of romantics called the dark romantics that see nature as dangerous and a powerful entity that has to be respected. So you may see elements like that. When you read Lord Byron, he has elements of the dark romantic in his poetry. So there's definitely less, you're going to see Wordsworth as a poet of happiness and light, and Byron is a little bit darker in his poetry. Here's again a romantic painting from the period where nature is the primary element. This is another great romantic painting where you have nature as the large scope and the individual reflecting on nature, but the individual is compared to nature a small thing, and that's where we go and we can learn truth and enlightenment. All right, so I hope you've enjoyed this overview of Romanticism. The Praise That Pays quiz that you're going to be taking, I'm going to give you the answer, so I hope you were paying attention. What is nature for the Romantics? Is it A, a nice place to vacation, B, a source of comfort, shelter, and truth, or C, somewhere to experiment with science? Hopefully you chose B, that's the answer. At this time, go ahead and go into the course and take your Phrase That Pays quiz. I hope you have a great week. Please join us for live sessions to learn more about Wordsworth and Byron and Shelley and all the romantic poets. It'll be really great and will help you with the course to help you succeed. Thanks so much and have a great week. Bye-bye.